There's a battery you can buy for less than $2,000, plugged directly into a standard wall socket and used to cut your home's electricity bill by up to 60% without solar panels, without a licensed electrician, and without permission from your utility company. It doesn't generate a single watt of its own power. It doesn't need the sun. It doesn't need the wind. It simply exploits a hidden pricing gap that utility companies have quietly built into every American's electricity bill for the last 20 years. Buying power at the moment it's cheapest and giving it back to your home at the moment it's most expensive. Yet despite the technology being commercially available, tested across 3 continents, and backed by governments desperate to stabilize aging grids, most American homeowners have never heard of it, and most utility companies would prefer to keep it that way. This is the plug-in home battery, and it may be the single most cost-effective piece of hardware you can put in your house right now. In this video, we're going to break down what it is, how it turns your utility company's pricing structure against them, what it really saves once you count the losses nobody mentions, and how long it takes to pay for itself. Now, before we get into the mechanics, we need to talk about the pricing that makes all of this possible. For most of the 20th century, American electricity was built on a flat rate. You paid the same for a kilowatt hour at 3 in the morning as you did at 6 in the evening. It was simple. It was predictable. And it was, from the utility's perspective, a losing proposition, because the true cost of making electricity swings dramatically over a day. They lost money on every kilowatt hour sold at peak and printed money on every one sold overnight. So in the early 2000s, they started rolling out time of use pricing. Under it, a kilowatt hour bought at 2 in the morning might cost you 8 cents. That same kilowatt hour at 7 in the evening, when air conditioners are running and dinner is cooking, can cost you 45 cents. The gap between those two numbers is the arbitrage window, and that window is what a plug-in home battery is built to exploit. Now, the idea of storing electricity in a residential battery is not new. Tesla launched the Powerwall in 2015, and it was hailed as a revolution. But the Powerwall was and still is a hardwired appliance requiring a licensed electrician, a structural mount, a utility interconnection agreement, and a bill that regularly exceeds $15,000 installed. The plug-in home battery came from a different direction entirely. In 2011, Japan was hit by the Fukushima disaster, which forced the shutdown of a nuclear fleet that had been supplying roughly 30% of the country's electricity. Rolling blackouts became a national reality. In response, the Japanese government subsidized a nationwide push for household energy storage. Within 5 years, Japan had installed more household battery systems than the rest of the world combined. But the real breakthrough came from the manufacturers who watched that market emerge. Companies like EcoFlow, Bluetti, and Anker realized that if you took the same lithium iron phosphate cells going into Japanese homes, put them in a portable case with a bidirectional inverter and a standard wall plug, you could deliver most of the value of a Powerwall for a fraction of the cost. By 2024, plug-in home batteries were a mainstream category in Europe, Australia, and East Asia, sold alongside kettles and refrigerators. In the United States, they remain a well-kept secret. To understand why this matters, we need to break down exactly how one of these devices works and where its limits actually sit. At the center of every plug-in home battery is a lithium iron phosphate cell. This chemistry is different from the lithium-ion batteries you'll find in a laptop or a phone. It's heavier and slightly less energy dense, but in exchange, it delivers 3 advantages for stationary storage. It can be cycled roughly 6,000 times before its capacity meaningfully degrades. It is far more stable under heat than the chemistries it replaced, and it holds its charge for weeks. That cell is wired into a battery management system that regulates charging, prevents overvoltage, and watches cell temperature constantly. That system feeds a bidirectional inverter, which is the heart of the whole thing. A normal power supply moves current one way. A bidirectional inverter moves it both ways. Charging, it pulls alternating current from the socket, converts it to direct current, and stores it. Discharging, it converts that back and feeds it to whatever is wired through it. And that last point is where most of the confusion lives, so it's worth being precise. These systems are not shoving power backwards out of a wall socket into your house wiring. That is called backfeeding. It is prohibited almost everywhere without a proper transfer switch, and it is genuinely dangerous to line workers who have every right to assume a deadline is dead. What they do is sit between the grid and a set of loads, either appliances plugged straight into the unit or a small sub-panel wired through a listed transfer switch. The battery comes with a monitoring clamp fitted to the main line entering your home. That clamp reads your live electricity draw. When it senses the house pulling power at peak rates, the battery switches to discharge and carries those loads itself. When rates fall overnight, it switches back and refills cheap. The user does nothing. There is no schedule to set, no app to open, no meter to read. The device simply watches the household's consumption profile and shifts electricity from the cheap hours into the expensive ones. So let's do the arithmetic properly, because this is where most videos on this subject quietly cheat. Say your utility charges 8 cents per kilowatt hour at 3 in the morning and 42 cents at 7 in the evening, and you move 3 kilowatt hours through the battery each day. Discharging 3 kilowatt hours at peak avoids about $1.26 of expensive grid power. But no battery gives back everything you put into it. Around 15% is lost as heat during conversion. So refilling those 3 kilowatt hours actually means buying closer to 3.5 at the cheap rate, which costs you about 28 cents. Your real net saving is a little under $1 a day, call it $30 a month, or roughly $360 a year. And that is the number the sales pages leave out. $360 a year against a $3,000 kit is a payback period of about 8 years. Against a $2,000 unit, it's closer to 5.5. For a device rated to run for 16 years, neither of those is a bad trade. But neither is the overnight win the marketing implies, and anyone quoting you a saving that ignores conversion losses is selling you something. There's something worth sitting with in that arrangement. Utilities have quietly spent the last 20 years engineering a pricing structure that extracts maximum value from every household at the exact hour that household can least afford to pay it. The plug-in home battery doesn't fight that pricing structure. It just turns it back on the utility one cycle at a time and lets the household keep the margin that was previously flowing in the other direction. But those are just the savings on ordinary days. The real value of a plug-in home battery shows itself during grid stress events. During the Texas winter storm of 2021, wholesale electricity prices in some markets briefly touched $9 per kilowatt hour. Households on wholesale indexed plans faced monthly bills that ran into the tens of thousands. A plug-in battery, sitting quietly in a garage, would have carried its owner's essential loads through the worst of that window. Now, if you've heard of home batteries before, you're probably aware of a couple of concerns. The first is fire. Older lithium-ion chemistries, particularly nickel, manganese, cobalt, have a documented history of thermal runaway, and there have been high-profile incidents involving cars, electric bikes, and grid-scale sites. But every plug-in home battery on the market now uses lithium iron phosphate, which is dramatically harder to push into thermal runaway. Its onset temperature is far higher, and it does not shed oxygen as it breaks down, so a failure tends to vent rather than ignite. It is the chemistry commercial grid-scale storage is built from precisely because it is so difficult to set alight. The second concern is cycle life. A traditional lead-acid battery might handle 500 deep cycles before it becomes useless. An early lithium-ion residential battery might reach 2,000. Modern lithium iron phosphate cells routinely pass 6,000 cycles, which works out at more than 16 years of daily use before capacity drops below 80% of the rated figure. Even at year 20, the battery is not dead. It is just working at reduced capacity. So the two objections people raise most often have largely been answered by the chemistry. The objection that actually holds is the one about your rate plan, and we'll come back to it. And when you look at what this technology has already done in markets that embraced it, the case gets easier to make. In South Australia, a state-run virtual power plant has enrolled thousands of households, each fitted with a battery, and dispatches their combined storage to steady the grid during demand spikes. Those households earn several $100s a year in credits on top of what they save themselves. In California, the state's self-generation incentive program has quietly paid out hundreds of millions in rebates for home storage, including a carve-out for households in high fire risk zones where outages are routine. In Texas, deregulated retail providers have begun offering free overnight electricity plans aimed specifically at households with battery storage, since it costs them almost nothing to sell power at 3 in the morning that would otherwise be curtailed at the source. The plug-in home battery, in other words, is not a fringe technology. It is a mature product category that much of the developed world has already adopted. The United States is one of the last major markets where it remains legally and culturally marginal. It's a strange reality that in 2026, plugging a battery into your own wall socket to sidestep peak hour rates is still a regulatory question in most of the country, while a Japanese retiree has been doing exactly that as an ordinary evening habit for over a decade. So the natural question is why? The answer, as with so many of these technologies, sits at the intersection of regulation and economic incentive. American utilities spent the last century building a business model around centralized generation and monopoly distribution. A battery a homeowner can move between houses without an electrician undermines that at a structural level. Every kilowatt hour through a home battery is one the utility cannot mark up at peak. Federal regulation has been favorable in principle. In 2020, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued Order 2222, requiring grid operators to let distributed energy resources take part in wholesale markets. On paper, a landmark. In practice, implementation has been slow, uneven, and shaped almost entirely by the utilities themselves. Some states moved fast on virtual power plants. Others quietly imposed interconnection rules that shut residential batteries out entirely. And there's a second layer of friction locally. Many homeowners associations still class battery installs as hazardous, citing fire codes written before lithium iron phosphate existed. Some permit offices demand a full electrical inspection for any device that can feed household wiring, even a portable one. This channel exists for people who would rather understand the engineering and the pricing structure quietly shaping what shows up on their utility bill than accept the default that a household has no leverage over what it pays for power. But for homeowners willing to work within the current framework, the market has quietly matured. Several plug-in home battery systems are now sold in the United States. The EcoFlow Delta Pro Ultra delivers around 6 kilowatt hours of usable storage in a single unit and stacks well beyond that. 5-year warranty on the inverter, 10 on the cells. Full kits run $3,500 to $4,500. The Anker Solix F3800 is comparable, delivering close to 4 kilowatt hours at a slightly lower price. It works with a clamp for automatic time of use switching and chains with extra modules. Full kits run $2,800 to $3,500. The Bluetti EP900 sits at the top end, offering 9 kilowatt hours with a hardwired option for households wanting a semi-permanent fixture that can still be disconnected as an appliance. Kits run $5,000 to $6,500. Before buying any of these systems, 3 things should be verified. The battery must carry UL 9540 certification, the safety standard specific to residential energy storage. Your current time of use rate needs confirming, because if your utility bill's a single flat rate all day and plenty still do, the arbitrage saving is not small, it is 0, and no amount of hardware will change that. And your peak hour consumption should be measured with a simple energy monitor, so the battery is sized to actually cover it. It is worth pausing on the fact that a device this simple and this well understood has sat in plain sight for a decade and remains almost invisible in American homes. Nobody banned it. No regulator forbade it. It was simply kept out of the ordinary consumer's line of sight by confusing terminology, interconnection paperwork, and a marketing budget no independent manufacturer can match. The plug-in home battery does not generate electricity. It generates leverage. It takes the pricing structure utility companies use to extract maximum value from your household and turns it back on them one cycle at a time. It will not make you rich, and it will not pay for itself by Christmas. But for a few thousand once, with no ongoing fees, no contractor visits, and no permission from a utility executive, a household can claw back a real piece of the value that has quietly been leaving their bank account every peak hour, every day, for as long as they have been paying an electric bill. It makes you wonder how long a system built on charging you the most at the moment you need it the most can actually last once ordinary people start working out how to sidestep it.